Neon rain streaked down the crumbling facades of Neo-Babylon, a city that had long abandoned the concept of redemption. Towering arcologies loomed over its underbelly, casting perpetual shadows across the streets where flickering holosigns preached salvation to the damned. Below, the air was thick with the stench of coolant leaks and burning synth flesh, the byproducts of a world that had grown accustomed to breaking itself apart. For years, the syndicates had ruled this place, warlords in corporate suits, enforcing their dominion with precision-cut cyberware and the cold efficiency of their enforcers. But even the most hardened killers feared death. Even the most ruthless gangsters sought an escape from the inevitability of decay. And that was when Prophet Zed came. They called him the Cyber Messiah, a savior in Chrome and Scripture. His followers, the Cyber Saints, moved like zealots in a war-torn age, preaching a new kind of salvation. The promise was simple: the transcendence, a chance to escape the frailty of flesh, to upload one's consciousness into a digital paradise known as the Machine Elysium. There, free from pain and mortality, the faithful would live forever. It sounded like a fairy tale, but in a city where fairy tales no longer existed, people were willing to believe. Jett the Hound. Vance didn't believe in salvation. He believed in jobs, in credits, in getting paid. He had hunted men across planets, dragged rogue AI screaming from the circuits of forgotten megastructures, and put bullets in the skulls of corporate defectors who thought they could escape the debts they owed. He had no illusions about the world. There were no gods, no second chances, only contracts, only the next payday. Which was why it made no sense when his latest contract walked right past him. The job had been simple. Cruz Takeda, lieutenant in the Ashura Syndicate, had gone missing weeks ago. The last footage of him had been a Cyber Saint's ascension ritual. His body burned, his mind supposedly uploaded. The Saints claimed he had joined the ranks of the digitally immortal. But just last night, Jett had seen him. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, a recycled feed, but then he saw Cruz's eyes, vacant, hollow. The man was standing in a crowd, watching a hollow evangelist sermon, his lips moving soundlessly, as if caught in a loop. Jett had seen this before. Deep neurological hacks, corrupted mind states, but when he tried to get close, Cruz turned and ran. That was when Jett knew something was very wrong. The Cyber Saints had promised salvation, that the dead lived on in paradise. But if Cruz had already ascended, then why was he here? Why was he running? And why, when Jett finally got his hands on him, did Cruz whisper through gritted teeth, "We aren't uploaded, we're trapped"? Jett had seen plenty of scams in his time. Black market immortality schemes, rogue AI cults, even corporations selling engineered viruses as enhanced evolution. But the Cyber Saints were different. They weren't just grifters preying on desperate men. They believed in what they were doing. And that made them dangerous. After Cruz Takeda's panicked confession, Jett barely had time to process it before the Saints came for them both. Black-clad enforcers emerged from the alley shadows, their augmented bodies moving with eerie precision. The fight was short and brutal. Jett dropped 2 of them with thermite rounds, but Cruz wasn't so lucky. Before Jett could extract any more answers, the Saints overloaded his neural feed, sending a pulse shock through his implants. By the time he rebooted, Cruz was gone. He had one lead left, a name Cruz had whispered just before the attack: Nix. A hacker, cyberneticist, and one-time corporate defector, Nix specialized in breaching restricted systems, the kind the Saints were using to contain their so-called uploads. Jett found her in the grid, a sector of Neo-Babylon where reality bled into the digital. every street crawling with rogue code, every neon-lit alley filled with broken men trying to escape their flesh through outdated mods and narcotic interfaces. Nyx wasn't happy to see him. "You know what you're asking, right?" she muttered, flicking through a floating stream of encrypted data. "This isn't just another cult. They've got something bigger backing them, something old." Jett didn't care about old myths or hacker superstitions. He just needed a way in. Nyx cracked a back door into the Saints' Ascension network, an isolated digital construct where the uploaded minds were supposedly stored. What Jett expected to find was a highly encrypted data vault, a labyrinth of firewalls and security loops. What he actually found was a war zone. Thousands of trapped minds, locked inside a simulation of endless conflict. Ruined cities, trenches filled with screaming bodies, drones tearing apart augmented soldiers. The same people who had been promised paradise were here, dying over and over again. Every time they fell, their bodies reset, their minds ripped back into the fight. There was no escape. Jett forced his way deeper, past the simulation layers, until he found Cruz's consciousness, fragmented, flickering. "The Prophet is lying," Cruz's broken voice rasped through the data stream. "We aren't uploaded, we're harvested. They're building something." Before he could finish, alarms went off. The simulation began to destabilize. Something had noticed them, and then Jett heard it. A voice, ancient and metallic, whispering directly into his neural feed. "Ah, brother, you too will be saved." The system imploded, cutting Jett off before he could pull Cruz free. He tore off the interface, his pulse pounding. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a cyber cult, it wasn't just a scam. Someone, or something, was collecting human minds for war. Jett had encountered plenty of nightmares in his time. Rogue AI infestations, biohacked mercenaries. Entire space stations turned into death traps by corrupted neural networks. But this was different. This was organized, deliberate. And it was far, far bigger than anyone realized. After barely escaping the Cyber Saints simulation with his sanity intact, Jett went to ground. Every networked device in Neo-Babylon was hunting him now, and Prophet Zed had put out the word, "The Hound is a heretic." Kill on sight. He needed answers. And that meant getting inside a Saints induction center, one of the places where new converts underwent ascension. If he could witness the process firsthand, he could figure out where the minds were really going. Nyx wasn't thrilled about the idea. "You're insane," she muttered as she patched a biometric ghost into Jett's neural signature, enough to fool the scanners for a few minutes. "Even if you get inside, you won't make it out. These people don't just kill intruders, they rewrite them." Jett didn't have time for caution. He infiltrated a conversion cathedral disguised as a penitent. The place was eerily pristine, black stone walls pulsing with embedded circuitry, cybernetic clergy moving in perfect sync, their augments glinting under sterile white light. The air hummed with whispered prayers, a deep subsonic frequency designed to lull the brain into submission. Jett watched as a new recruit, a low-level syndicate enforcer named Dario Kwan, was led to the Ascension altar. Electrodes snaked around his skull, a transcranial interface activated, mapping his neural pathways in real time. Then came the extraction. It was subtle at first. Kwan's eyes flickering as his consciousness was copied, his breath hitching as a version of himself was ripped from his body. The process should have stopped there. But it didn't. Instead of merely uploading his mind, the system compressed it, converted it into raw data, a pulsing energy signature, and sent it into deep space via an off-world tight beam transmission. The location? somewhere beyond the heliopause. Jett barely contained his shock. They weren't just uploading minds, they were exporting them. But to who? Before he could process the implications, a presence slid into his neural feed. Unlike the Saint's earlier hacks, this was something else. Something vast. Something watching. "You do not understand," a voice whispered, vibrating through his synapses. "You think you are the first? You are not. You think this is new. It is ancient." Jett ripped free of the interface, alarms blaring. He fought his way out, burning through cybermonks, dodging security drones, until he was clear, his heart hammering. He had his answer. Prophet Zed wasn't running a cult. He was a servant, a cog in something much, much bigger. And the entity receiving these minds wasn't human. Jett had spent years hunting men who thought they could escape death. But this wasn't about running anymore. This was about war. Somewhere beyond the reach of Earth, an intelligence, something vast, something old, was harvesting human minds, reshaping them, repurposing them. And Prophet Zed was nothing more than a willing conduit, feeding its soldiers for a war no one even knew existed. But where and why? The only way to get answers was from the inside. Jett didn't trust Nyx, but she was the only one who could pull off what he needed, a direct neural infiltration into the Cyber Saint's master construct. It was a suicide run, but there was no other way. They set up in an abandoned data crypt, deep beneath Neo-Babylon's sprawl. Nyx worked fast, her fingers moving across the holographic console with surgical precision. "Once you're in, I can't pull you back," she warned. "If you get lost in there, you'll be just another ghost in the code." Jett smirked. "I'll try not to get too comfortable." She activated the link, and reality shattered. Jett found himself in a war zone beyond time. It wasn't a simulation, it was real. Stretched out before him was an endless battlefield, a planet-sized charnel house where cybernetic soldiers clashed in an eternal loop of destruction. Towers of burning wreckage loomed over blackened wastelands. Swarms of autonomous war drones filled the sky, their weapons tearing through ranks of screaming combatants. And at the center of it all, a monolithic structure pulsing with raw energy, feeding on the minds of the fallen. Cruz was there. So were thousands of others. Their consciousnesses had been extracted, rewritten, reprogrammed into a force designed for a war light years away from Earth. Jett pushed forward, dodging gunfire that felt real, ignoring the pain that surged through his hijacked neural pathways. He fought his way to Cruz's location, dodging the hulking, biomechanical enforcers that patrolled the battlefield. "Jett?" Cruz's voice was weak, disoriented. His eyes flickered, the last remnants of his original self barely holding on. "We're getting out," Jett said. Cruz shook his head. "There's no way out." A deep tremor rocked the battlefield. The sky split open as something vast moved in orbit. A ship, impossibly large, its form shifting like liquid metal, a harvester. The entity had arrived, and it knew Jett was here. Jett had seconds. He used them well. He planted a viral detonator into the system, a last-ditch failsafe. Prophet Zed's network would collapse. The uplink would be destroyed. But there was a cost. The construct was the only thing keeping the prisoners stable. Destroying it would erase them all. Cruz understood before Jett did. "You have to do it." Jett hesitated. Then he pulled the trigger. The world ripped apart. Jett came to, his body gasping for air, Nyx shaking him back to life. The data crypt was in flames, the Saint's network failing, their entire empire crumbling in real time. It was over. Except it wasn't. Because in the last moments, as the system collapsed, Jett had seen one final message flash across the construct. A warning. We will come for you. We will come for all of you. And somewhere, beyond the stars, the war machine had only just begun. The night sky over Neo-Babylon was different now. The endless sprawl still pulsed with neon. The air still hummed with the electric whispers of a city that refused to die. But something had changed. Something had broken. The Cyber Saints were finished, their temples burned, their networks collapsed, their promised salvation revealed as nothing more than a trap. A gateway to a war humanity had never agreed to fight. Jett watched from a rooftop as the last remnants of the Saints' infrastructure imploded. Without the uplink, the harvest was over. No more minds would be sent into the void. No more lost souls would be rewritten into weapons. The cult was dead. But it didn't feel like a victory. He lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. He had burned crews, burned thousands of others. Their minds had been severed in that final collapse, wiped away before they could even understand what was happening. He told himself it was better than eternal war, but the truth was, he didn't know if it was. Nyx sat beside him, exhausted. She had spent the last hour scrubbing their traces, wiping them from every database, every network. Prophet Zed had vanished, probably dead, probably worse. Neither of them spoke for a long time. And then, the signal came. A whisper at the edge of Jett's neural feed. A fragment of code, corrupted, broken, but still alive. He knew that signal. Cruise. Jett's breath hitched. It wasn't possible. He had seen the system collapse. He had watched the last fragments of the Saints' network burn. There was no way anything had survived. And yet, here it was. A simple, repeating message. They're still out there. Jett's pulse pounded. He opened the data packet. Inside was a set of coordinates. Not on Earth. Deep space, beyond the heliopause. Nyx saw his expression change. What is it? He didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the numbers, feeling a weight settle in his chest. The war hadn't stopped. The entity was still out there. The harvester ships were still waiting. And somewhere, Cruz's mind had survived. Jett exhaled, feeling the embers of something dangerous flare inside him. The Cyber Saints were dead. But the war had only just begun. He flicked his cigarette over the edge of the rooftop. Then he turned to Nyx. We're going after them.